fact or fiction? It's becoming increasingly hard to tell in our online world. From misleading bots to AI sometimes getting it wrong to manipulated messages, online misinformation and disinformation is spreading. So, how can people uncover the actual truth? And is there a way to be immune to misinformation in a digital world? I'm Stefanie Dekker, and this is The Street.
Do not believe everything you see on TikTok. People will just be like talking about things or describing things, and I look into it and it's just false. And there's almost never anyone expressing a single ounce of skepticism in the comments.
I truly cannot believe what just happened. The TikTok misinformation situation is so out of control.
No hate to that creator, but that is the weirdest piece of misinformation I've probably ever come across online.
I'm watching like very big time creators who have very big followings just say blatant misinformation, just peddling blatant misinformation. And it's like, that's a very dangerous thing to do.
Is that true?
Is that true? No, you idiots. That's just how susceptible we all are to misinformation. And it doesn't matter what app you use.
Now, every day, people around the world are exposed to a massive amount of online content. And while it is informative, a large part of it is unfortunately manipulated and misleading. Well, today we're looking into the ways that misinformation spreads online. How can we tell what's correct and what's clickbait? Well, to discuss all of this, we are first joined by John Roozenbeek. He's a lecturer in psychology at the University of Cambridge, and he joins us from London. We also have Runa Engen. She's the editor-in-chief of Faktisk, a Norwegian fact-checking organization that investigates misinformation and verifies content, often about war and conflict. And she joins us from Oslo. And later, here in the studio, I'll be joined by Marc Owen Jones. He's from Northwestern University, and he specializes in disinformation. Now, before we start our discussion, let's take a look at a recent survey on what people consider the most threatening issues today. Now, this might surprise you. This is a poll by Pew Research Center, and it found that adults in 25 countries across different continents see the online spread of misinformation as the #1 threat today. Now, that's ahead of the state of the global economy, which comes in second, and in third place, terrorism. Runa, let me start with you. You are fact-checking and verifying content online. How much of a problem would you say misinformation and disinformation is when it comes to our online world?
Well, first of all, it's much more a problem that we see when you look at social media like TikTok. And it's been very apparent because Norway's just been in the middle of an election. But this, I guess, is true anywhere. You see these participants in the debate on TikTok spreading misinformation, unfounded, unsubstantiated claims, and nobody's really handling it from the traditional media. We're not really there to do any fact-checking or bring any substantiated evidence to the conversation, which is a huge problem for us because these, call them lies or untruths, they get to spread quite quickly to a massive amount of people. And we don't really have any ways of tracking it, knowing what sort of posts are going viral at the moment, because that's not a part of TikTok's platform. So we see a lot of misinformation spreading that way, and we also see a lot of AI-generated posts spreading that way.
Now, the challenge with misinformation is not new. Researchers have been sounding the alarm for years, as highlighted by Al Jazeera's own documentary called The War on Truth from Al Jazeera Untangles. Now, this was the largest ever study of the spread of false news online, carried out in 2018.
A comprehensive study by researchers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology analyzed approximately 126,000 stories tweeted by 3 million users over more than a decade. The findings? False news stories are about 70% more likely to be retweeted than true ones. Moreover, these falsehoods reach 1,500 people 6 times faster than accurate stories. The study found that humans, not bots, are primarily responsible for the rapid spread of false news. People didn't just believe the lie, they wanted to believe it. Because beyond politics, beyond the facts and figures, the lie had something the truth often lacks: a story.
John, you came up with a study called the inoculation technique, which is supposed to help us identify what is right and what is wrong, what is the truth. Can you break that down for us in a simplified way? How can we protect ourselves against what isn't true online?
Yes. So inoculation theory is a theory from psychology and communication science, where the idea is that you expose yourself to a weakened version of the misinformation, which then builds what you might call cognitive antibodies, between brackets, scare quotes, against future manipulation and misinformation. So the idea is that it's analogous to a real vaccine, right? Where a vaccine is a weakened pathogen, a weakened virus, let's say, that when you introduce it to the body, the body builds antibodies against future infection, and you're better protected. And the idea here is that if you, for example, role play as someone who spreads misinformation, or if you see like a small but harmless piece of misinformation, you start to think about like why it might be misleading and why it might persuade people, and then you're less likely to be persuaded by it next time round. And you can do that in many ways, but one of the ways that we've done this is through games. So we have some games that we've published that people can play, where you play as the bad guy, if you will. You're the one spreading the fake news to other people. And in so doing, our research also shows you become better at identifying it in the future.
Is that something that's being applied like to people in schools? Like, is this being, because misinformation, as we said there, is so sort of widespread. Is this something that people are actively partaking in? Because it sounds like it's something that is needed.
Yes, so the games are online. You can Google them. Bad News, for example, is one of the games that we've made. And you can play them in a browser. You don't need to download anything. And some schools have indeed used these games, but also other measures. I don't just want to tout kind of the stuff that I've worked on myself exclusively as sort of media literacy interventions that are used in classrooms and as part of educational initiatives and information campaigns and so on. But I also think that we shouldn't just rely on kind of individuals, right? Like becoming immune against misinformation as the kind of primary solution to this problem. We also need to look at the production side, like why is it being produced, who is producing it, and what can we do to discourage people from creating misinformation in the first place and from becoming popular online by spreading misinformation, right? The example that you just mentioned of the TikTokers spreading misinformation, right? They must get something out of it, like they get a lot of likes or a lot of followers perhaps, or something else, right? And so it would be lovely if we could find ways to reduce the attractiveness, if you will, of online misinformation, of course, without infringing on people's right to express themselves freely, because after all, freedom of speech in most countries includes the freedom to be wrong about something.
Well, that's interesting, because what's also spreading misinformation are online bots, or what we call bad bots. Now, a bot, short for robot, is a software program that does automated repetitive tasks. So it's not actually a person posting an image or writing a comment or sending you that message. Now, a 2024 study by Imperva, that's a US cybersecurity company, found that 49%, that's almost half, of all internet traffic are bots, not real people. And bad bots, the ones spreading misinformation, reach their highest levels recorded, making up to 34% of internet traffic. Now, that's an extraordinary number, Runa, if you think that almost half of the internet are bots. Where does this come from? Who is creating it? What is behind it?
There are a number of different players on this field. So you have governments behind these bot factories. They're spamming the sort of international arena with different organizations and campaigns that they have. And sometimes understanding the why is a bit difficult, because you don't understand the end game of what they're doing. But they can be planting individual stories in a country. For instance, they planted a story in the Norwegian election that there is a river that's polluted, and it's not actually polluted. So what would be the end game of these Russian operatives in this case to plant this misinformation? Apparently, it's because they use this when they talk about a lack of control. this is not uncommon, but you have other players as well. It's not only the often talked about Russian factories. It could be players in the Middle East. You have different countries and sometimes commercially exploitative operations too. So it's not all for the sake of a government. It can also be for the sake of money. There is an attention economy in this, where if you get a lot of people to care about something and you get them united against something, that's something that you can capitalize and earn money off of. So we're interested to see how this economy works and what is the sort of global market of our attention that seems to be developing right now.
Global market of our attention. That's so interesting. And Runa, you have the science behind this because you do research online, so everything you say has been verified and fact checked. John, how hard is it to debunk? For example, misinformation goes viral, and we've seen so many cases of this even in the news, and you have even presidents and prime ministers, spreading misinformation, disinformation, and then someone comes out, official, and says this wasn't true. But the damage has been done, hasn't it? I mean, we hear things still being repeated now that were debunked 2 years ago.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think if someone's lying, then someone should correct that. I don't want to kind of throw the towel and say, like, that's a fruitless exercise. It definitely matters to debunk misinformation, right, in a positive way. But you're right that very often, right, like, far more people remember and are exposed to the initial misinformation than ever see the correction. But this is a widespread and well-known problem, not exclusive to online spaces, right? This is also true, for example, in the past when corrections were issued for false information in a newspaper, let's say. They would be issued on page 14 of the newspaper, right? And so far fewer people would see the correction than saw the original story, those kinds of things. So it is incredibly difficult, right, to correct misinformation comprehensively post hoc. Also because of a psychological phenomenon known as the continued influence effect, which basically says that people continue to rely somewhat even on information that has been corrected, and misinformation that has been corrected to them, right? So they no longer really believe it or express belief in it, but they haven't fully forgotten either. So later on, they might still sort of use some of this information in decision-making or in forming their beliefs. So it's incredibly difficult to kind of undo the damage kind of completely after someone has seen or has believed misinformation.
How widespread is this, Runa? You use AI, I understand, when it comes to your verification systems online. How much does AI work for you? And can it also be a problem when it comes to this?
To us, that is the most important question. So when we started out doing verification, we basically did everything ourselves. Journalists sitting, analyzing images and videos, trying to find out exactly where is this shot, using all these bits and pieces of the background, using all these technologies that were available at the time, like can you look at the shadows that the sun casts to find out when it was shot. And all of these operations were incredibly time consuming, but we did it, and we had a huge stab just doing this work, especially with the massive amounts of video and images coming from Ukraine. What we often find is that the images are not fake. They were real, but they were not what they seemed to be. So when you then skip 2 years and you're looking into 2024, that has completely changed. Now we have, first of all, more than 200 different tools that are based on AI and that help us reach those conclusions a lot faster. We're still sitting there doing individual reports on each piece of video or image that we're seeing, because we believe it's still important to keep humans in the loop. But we reach the conclusion a lot faster. We can find out what is necessary to fact check a lot faster. But also, of course, AI is responsible for creating a lot of the things that we're now checking and investigating. So because you have these platforms like TikTok with its algorithms that tend to favor content that really like touches us in an emotional way, and you at the same time have artificial intelligence that makes it really easy to make these images that are heartbreaking in content. You have this massive kind of a mechanism for spreading these images really quickly. And it's we have to kind of sprint, not run, to keep up.
It's interesting, isn't it? So a lot to look out for sure. John and Runa, thank you very much for joining us today here on the stream.
Think about it. What spreads faster? A long, carefully researched article explaining complex scientific data? Or a 15-second TikTok confidently claiming scientists are lying to you?
Stop believing what teachers, scientists, and the news and the NASA and the government tells you.
Yeah, the lie wins every single time. So what's wrong with the truth? Why is it so bad at keeping up? Maybe it's because sometimes the truth sounds just as unbelievable as a lie. Take these headlines. One of them is completely fake. Can you guess which one? Scientists have trained rats to drive tiny cars for treats. The Amazon rainforest now produces more carbon dioxide than it absorbs. Researchers discover a new species of snake that can survive being frozen for weeks. Well, the problem is, whether it's real or not, it all feels the same. In an endless stream of headlines, fact and fiction blur together, and the truth, slow, careful, deliberate, gets drowned out.
Now, that clip was from Al Jazeera's documentary, The War on Truth, from Al Jazeera Untangled. And joining me today here on set is Marc Owen Jones, who was in that documentary. Now, Marc is an associate professor of media analytics at Northwestern University in Qatar, and he specializes in disinformation and propaganda. Thank you for being here, Marc. I have a question for you. Sure. Truth seems to have an image problem, doesn't it? It's not spicy, it's not salacious, it's not emotive.
Right. I mean, it's true.
Well, at least one thing is true.
Right? Exactly. Because, you know, if you make a lie and you don't have any desire or need to attach yourself to the laborious process of fact-checking, then you can tell a good story, you can tell a salacious story, and you can appeal to people's emotions, which, as one of your guests said, is really key in getting that to spread. Remember, the things that often spread are things that make you angry or things that make you laugh. So basically cat videos or salacious disinformation. So yes, truth does have an image problem, but it's also not helped by the fact that we live in an age now where you see politicians and influencers lying and spreading lies.
Prime ministers.
Presidents. I mean, you know, today we even heard that Tylenol causes autism, right? So, you know, there's misinformation everywhere and disinformation. The trick is, which are we talking about, misinformation or disinformation?
Because there's an active difference.
There is. Misinformation is usually conceived of as the accidental spread of falsehoods, whereas disinformation is the deliberate spread of falsehoods that are harmful, right? And so disinformation to me is more sinister because it suggests that there's people out there, and there are people out there, who are actively spreading lies to actually make reality confusing. Right? How do we know what to believe when the people we trust or the institutions we trust are being undermined or people actively lying about them? So because that's a key difference.
Runa made an interesting point. Yeah. She called it, I think, the economy of our attention.
Yes, the attention economy, yes. Well, but this is because social media companies, and many of us now get our information from social media. How does their business model work? Well, they make money from us being on their applications longer. So how do they make more money? Well, they get us to spend more of our attention looking at their content. How do they get our attention then? Well, they basically put out or privilege information through the algorithm that's more likely to catch our attention, which is emotional stuff and often stuff that's not true.
Do they care about truth?
I would argue no. And one of the things that we see is evidence of this. Recently, when Trump was elected, we saw a lot of the social media companies get rid of their content moderation teams. Now, these are the teams that are meant to make the platform safer. And that includes getting rid of harmful information, much of which is false. And so now they've done away with that, or in many cases done away with a lot of those teams, which suggests that they don't really care about truth.
So how much of a problem is this? I mean, we just saw those research figures that almost 50% of internet traffic aren't real people. How can we tell what's real and what isn't?
To be honest, it's increasingly difficult, right? You can have, for example, I run an experiment with my students where I get them to say which of these accounts is a bot and which is not. And it's a sort of 50-50. So most of the time they can't tell what is real and what is not. There's no really solid way to just say, how do you spot this information? It really depends on the narrative. It depends on the story. And the problem with bots is, as this idea that it's 50%, they're the ones that are manipulating the algorithm. Say I want to spread health information or misinformation, I could hire a bot farm and I could get them to all promote this false story. And that by being promoted, by being liked very quickly, that means the algorithm then will pick that up and then spread that information, right? And you don't see a lot of that. A lot of that is invisible. So you might
That's
just...
the thing. Even influencer, for example, they're paid. There's paid ads, but they don't say that. So what they're saying, you're thinking is face value, but actually that's advertising for someone or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, also, when you look at something that gets served to you on your algorithm, something with loads of likes, how do you know if those likes are real people? Unless you go through all of them, and even then you can't tell, right? So there's so much anonymity behind the sort of infrastructure that shares and promotes this information.
Because when we see someone having so many followers, we immediately trust them. Right? Oh, they have 500,000 followers.
I would say most people do. I don't.
Okay,
but because of my work. But absolutely, because that's a mark of credibility and respect. There's a lot of people
Which is so dangerous these days.
Yeah, and also verification. For example, I mean, lots of social media platforms have like the blue tick, for example, on X.
But you can pay for that now.
You can pay for that now. You used to actually have to submit identity documents like a passport. Now you just need a credit card, right? So literally anyone with a credit card can create fake accounts and spread disinformation. I myself have found networks with loads of verified accounts that are bots, right? So all these systems that are meant to check the truth are failing, in some cases, just because these companies make money. And to go back to your question, do these companies care? Well, I think this verification system is a good example of why these companies, or how these companies don't care about the truth.
You have just completed a study on Israel and how its propaganda and PR and mis and disinformation campaign, actually, you called it a war on truth.
Yes. So I use the term alethicide, and it's a bit of a provocation. So aletheia is the Greek word for truth, and cide is the Latin word for killing. And it's based on the word genocide, which again means the killing of, a group of people. And in the case of law, it means the intent to kill or partially destroy a group of people. And I use this term deliberately because when we look at this information, I could spread a rumor about you. I don't want to. I know.
Guess it happens.
Yeah, exactly, right? I could spread a horrible rumor about you to try and harm your reputation. And it's horrible for you, of course, but let's look in the grand scheme of things. That's different disinformation from an attempt to spread falsehoods that allow people to justify genocide, the mass killing of people. So the idea with the killing of truth, or alethicide, is to say there's a big difference between just spreading, say, a rumor with malicious intent to spreading a whole narrative that's designed to actually allow people to think it's okay to massacre Palestinians.
And is that being bought?
This is being, well, it is being bought. I'm not saying that there aren't counter-narratives, but we have to bear in mind that alethicide, disinformation something doesn't just go viral because for the sake of it, right? The point I'm making about alethicide is that disinformation is more likely to go viral, it's more likely to become a truth believed by people if there's things that allow that to happen. And I want to give an example because I think it's important to clarify. Let's say the narrative that circulated after October the 7th, that Hamas had beheaded babies. This turned out to be false.
And they still talk about it
They still talk about it today, right? But why did that pick up? Well, we saw, for example, on the front of newspapers, this story that Hamas had beheaded 40 babies. We saw Joe Biden, the president at the time, say that he saw pictures of beheaded babies. Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs ran adverts on Google saying that Hamas had murdered babies. So all those things happen. And you have to ask yourself, well, if Hamas had ran ads on Google, would Biden say what Hamas said or call it propaganda? So the geopolitics, America's, for example, relationship with Israel, its positive support of Israel, informs what can and cannot be said. And to be explicit, Google took money from the Israel Ministry of Foreign Affairs to run disinformation, to serve that disinformation to more and more people. So when we talk about the killing of truth, we see there's actual structures, people getting money to do that. If the US government wanted to, they could have stopped Google from showing those false videos.
So
they would have done so.
There's an ingrained bias.
There's a bias.
We're running out of time. So very briefly, what does this mean for the future for all of us?
It means for the future that, one, yes, we have to be more careful of disinformation. We have to do media literacy, as your guests have said. But at the same time, if we want to actually counter propaganda, the structures of who owns social media companies, who regulates them, really needs to change. Because if there is an entity that's pushing these narratives, paying for them, and a government's allowing them to happen, we need more than just media literacy. Right? We need a full shift of who controls these companies and who's allowed to influence them.
Because this is the era that we're living in, right?
This is the era that we're living in because, look, most of the companies that determine what we see on the internet are based in one country, in the US, with the exception of TikTok, which is based in China. But now US have bought TikTok and at least have some control of TikTok. So we have to be aware that much of what we see is actually influenced by one country that happens to be the global superpower.
And that is the world we live in today. Marc, thank you very much for joining us here on the stream in the studio. And thank you for being part of the conversation. And I'll see you soon.